expand. They had to build a coalition of people who would vote for them who didn't care about money or billionaires, because there aren't enough billionaires or people who want corporations to make more profits to
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code TOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code TOM.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms, in our fields, our streets, and our sewers, our bodies, and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until, at last, we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits, in that secret, a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer health care, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide health care to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America,
but to build the greatest healthcare program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of healthcare. I believe this healthcare is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are healthcare. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer healthcare is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18 and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve needs a wheelchair to move and a ventilator to help him breathe. The book, Health Justice Now, Timothy Faust.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak. It is the end of a week, and the vice president has said, Mike Pence has said, no, he's not going to pull the plug on the 25th, or pull a, whatever the metaphor is, on the 25th Amendment. It ain't going to happen, so that means that it's up to Congress. Articles of impeachment are in preparation or have been prepared. There is a slight parliamentary procedure that Congress has to go through. It takes a day or two for all this stuff to work its way through the system, and I realize that can be very frustrating, particularly when Mr. Crazy has his finger on the nuclear trigger, but that's what it is. And, we'll see how this shakes out. I am of the opinion that, and by the way, it's Anything Goes Friday. Whatever you want to talk about today, it's fine. It's you and me for our first and third hour. Our second hour today, the entire hour, will be California Congressman Khanna. He represents the Silicon Valley area, Cupertino and environs. And he's also a vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He will be with us for the entire hour, taking your calls in the second hour of our program today. But in any case, Mike Pence has said no, the impeachment is up. We'll see what happens. Just to remind you, the phone number for Congress, if you want to encourage your Congress critter that, and Republican or Democrat. In fact, I think probably it's more important for Republicans to hear from us than Democrats. But, yesterday people were calling and saying they were literally just going through and calling every single member of the Senate and as many members of the House as they possibly could. The telephone number for the switchboard on Capitol Hill, which will route you, and they will route you to whichever member of Congress you want. And if you don't know their name, if you're not sure who represents you in the House of Representatives, just say, hey, here's my zip code, and they can tell you. And or typically that's how it works. I don't know, maybe they'll be real busy today, but typically that's how it works. If you're not sure who your two senators are from your state, unless you live in D.C., of course, when you don't have no senators, which is particularly weird. I mean, this is why D.C. was unable to protect itself and why the Capitol was not protected, was because Donald Trump issued a stand-down order, essentially, to the National Guard, said you may not provide the Capitol Police with assistance, with reconnaissance, with weapons, or yourselves. You may not go. So, and the, Muriel Bowser, the mayor, who should be the governor of the District of Columbia. I mean, there's more people in D.C. than there are in Wyoming or Vermont. She should have been able to send, soldiers in, troops in, police in, whatever. She couldn't. So anyhow, that needs to be taken care of. But bottom line is that Mike Pence says no, and now we have this is a letter that Justin Frank is a regular guest on our program. He's a psychiatrist in Washington, D.C., professor of psychiatry, in fact, at George Washington University. And he wrote this letter to Mike Pence and sent it just a few minutes ago. He said, Dear Vice President Mike Pence, we submit the following recommendations for immediate psychiatric evaluation of Donald J. Trump. The president's actions in the past few days indicate that he is unfit to serve. In the coming hours, he is likely to suffer progressive deterioration of his mental state and impulse control as the reality of his election loss and the suspension from social media deprive him of contact with his supporters. He has already shown himself on January 6th to be a danger to others. Hospitalization will prevent Mr. Trump from harming himself and or others, or from directing another episode of group violence, while preserving his dignity and that of his office. Please contact one or all of us for more clinical details. This is signed by Justin Frank, MD, and presumably by his colleagues, of his. Good on you. In fact, you can tweet you can tweet Dr. Frank at Justin Frank MD if you want to, give him a attaboy. But I think the big point that I want to make today, and I made this in my daily rant over on Medium.com this morning, or thomhartmann.medium.com, is that it's the brutality, it's the fascism. People are looking at this situation right now and going, wow, look at what happened on Wednesday in the Capitol. That was our peak fascism moment. We're pulling back from that. We're withdrawing from that. No, we are not. That was not peak fascism. That was just a bump in the road. And these guys are continuing down this road. That was an opportunity for Donald Trump. More than half, 57% of the Republican caucus in Congress, in the House and Senate, and their followers, their fascist followers, to find out what the consequences would be of trying to overthrow the government of the United States. And what they found out so far is that, hey, it's not even as bad as getting busted for drunk driving. As these guys were marching through the inside of the Capitol building, chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." This was their chant. And they had set up a gallows outside the Capitol building. And there were guys with zip ties that police use for handcuffs looking for Mike Pence, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi explicitly. I mean, this is just mind-boggling. Jim Borg is a reporter for Reuters. And he said, I heard at least 3 different rioters at the Capitol say that they hope to find Vice President Mike Pence and execute him by hanging him from a Capitol Hill tree as a traitor. It was a common line being repeated. Many more were just talking about how the VP should be executed. That's a reporter, a writer, a photographer for Reuters. Capitol Hill reporter Andrew Feinberg said the rioters were looking for Pence, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. A Trump supporter who spoke to local CBS 17, CBS TV, local TV in Washington, D.C., said, quote,
People got news on their phone that Mike Pence said he's not going to object to these 7 states, that he's going to accept the Electoral College that promotes President-elect Joe Biden, she said. That's when everybody got really upset, and that's when they started storming. So did this come through the Parler app? Did it come through a text message? We've got video now. It's up at the very top of the Drudge Report right now of the Trump family partying as the riot is about to begin. And Don Jr. going, hey guys, thanks so much. Let's get out there and fight. Yeah. Meanwhile, and as I point out in my piece on medium.com this morning, the hallmark of fascism is brutality and violence. And Representative Susan Wild, a new member of Congress from Pennsylvania's 7th District. Actually, I'm not sure if she's a new member, but she represents Pennsylvania's 7th. And she went on CBS News this morning, I guess it was yesterday morning, and said that there were 300 to 400 people locked in one single room in the Capitol. They were so close together, it was impossible to social distance. You couldn't stay 6 feet away from people. And she said about half of the people in the room were not wearing masks. Even though they'd been offered surgical masks, they refused to wear them. Some of the newer Republican members were openly flaunting that they refused to wear a mask. Another member of Congress noted that some of the older Democratic members were literally begging Republicans to wear masks because they didn't want to die, and the Republicans were laughing at them. That's the kind of brutality that tells you you are now in full fascism. Anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday. We'll be back with your calls right after this. 15 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Anything Goes Friday. We can talk about the events of the week. We can talk about flying saucers, whatever's on your mind. I have a feeling I know what's going to be coming up. And welcome back. Mike in Lomita, California. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I just wanted to assert my argument for why the fifth columnist senators like Hawley and Cruz should not have any defense when they're removed from office. The normal defense would be, well, we're just exercising our legislative function and we have legislative immunity and that sort of thing. However, when they keep saying in total disregard for all the evidence that there's been to date, including the 60-odd court cases and the statement by the Trump Attorney General that there was no widespread fraud, they say, well, yeah, but there are people out there that have doubt about that. And so we just suspend the Constitution for a while we get together this commission to satisfy these people. And that completely ignores the fact that these people believe all this rubbish because they are lied to by Donald Trump. And the Constitution,
and
therefore,
Josh
would never...
Hawley and Ted Cruz, yes.
Right. And the Constitution would never come back into effect until Donald Trump started telling the truth. And when has that ever been known to occur?
It's never happened in my lifetime.
Oh, by the way, on the business about impeachment, and when in case of impeachment applies and pardons are not permitted, I think that can only reasonably be from the moment that the articles are filed through to a resolution of the case or, removal from office. Because otherwise, what would be the purpose of it?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I mean, the person who reached out to me yesterday and said, it's not during time of impeachment, it's in case of impeachment, said that there are some who suggest that what that means is that the president can't pardon somebody who has been impeached. I'm not sure that's what it means, but the fact of the matter is nobody's sure what it means because it's never been adjudicated by the Supreme Court. And under the doctrine of judicial supremacy, which we have been living under since 1803. Until the Supreme Court says this is what the Constitution means, it's relatively ambiguous. So, the thing that I could see playing out, Mike, would be Trump, they file articles of impeachment against him in the House of Representatives. They get voted and they get passed. So he's now been officially impeached in the House. It goes to the Senate. During that time, Trump issues a massive pardon for his friends, his family, and maybe even for everybody, all the insurrectionists and traitors who showed up at the Capitol building. At that point, somebody sues saying, no, you can't do that, presumably a member of Congress on behalf of Congress, at the Supreme Court, which has original jurisdiction in disputes among branches. And then the Supreme Court decides, whether they could decide really quickly. I mean, you would think that they can, but that's my guess, Mike, as to how it would have to play out.
Well, there we have to go into the arguments before the court, and central to that would be, if they put this provision in, why did they put it in? And I think it's because...
Right. And that takes us back to Madison's notes.
Otherwise, you can get Roger Stone pardoned or some other accessory pardoned so that they cannot be compelled to testify and convict on impeachment.
Right. I'm with you. And I don't, I'd have to go back and pull up my copy of Madison's notes on the convention. But I thought it was fairly clear that what they were talking about was preventing a president from pardoning his co-conspirators. We'll be right back. Thank you, Mike. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. In our special video over at ThomHartmann.com for supporters of our program, the one today is for anybody who has any connection, or for this week, anybody who has any connection with the military or anybody in the military who might still think that Donald Trump is a good guy. And I'm going through I don't know how many, 20, 30, 40, 50 individual data points of times when Trump has trashed our troops, when Trump has deported troops, when Trump has deported military spouses who aren't citizens, when Trump has lied to our troops, when Trump has, specifically pulled money from our troops. I mean, he took money out of military housing, which is in some parts of the country, mold infested and really in a crisis, to build his border wall that Mexico is supposed to pay for. That's just one example. So there's a whole list of these things in that new video that's available over at ThomHartmann.com, especially for anybody you know who has any consideration or concern at all for our U.S. military. Welcome back. Anything Goes Friday. By the way, apparently one of the Republican members who refused to wear a mask while they were in lockdown in the House of Representatives was Jake LaTurner, Republican from Kansas. He's a newly elected member, and yesterday he announced that he has tested positive for COVID-19. Brilliant. Anyhow, just to finish the point that I was making, this is not peak fascism. This is a test. And it's happening all over the country, by the way. We had our state house here in Oregon. We had a Republican member let the gangs into the Capitol building. It's happened in at least a dozen states where the capitals are being, or at least a half a dozen that I know of, where the capitals were under assault on Wednesday. And from what I'm reading on Twitter and from what I'm hearing people are reading on Parler, this was a dress rehearsal for the 20th. And if that's true, then, get ready. Get ready. Anyhow, let's pick up your phone calls. As I said, it's Anything Goes Friday. Justin in Summit Hill, Pennsylvania. Hey, Justin, what's up?
Hi, Tom. We're going along with the 25th Amendment, and if they go through with this, first off, I believe that Pence should not be allowed to pardon anybody just for the fact that Trump doesn't have a chance at a pardon or anything like that. I mean, that's I mean, because we're just asking for it. If, let's say, we pull with the 25th and Pence does pardon him, we're up the creek there, aren't we?
We could be. I mean, this is all unknown territory, Justin. The Supreme Court has not weighed in on the pardon powers of the president, on whether he can self-pardon or not. It's clear that the vice president can pardon the president. That's what Jerry Ford did with Richard Nixon, and he did so in a very generalized way. He said basically all crimes between two dates, which was the date that he was inaugurated and the date that he left office. And
I have another.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, I have another question, and that was regarding the one part you said regarding the one newly elected senator who came down with COVID. Now, can't they charge him with assault as to giving people COVID? Because honestly, this was done in Pennsylvania. This was done in the Pennsylvania House. Basically, they hid COVID from the Democratic people, from the Democratic representatives, and tried to get them caught with COVID. So I think that should be assault on a federal representative. I could believe that a person should be charged with assault on a federal representative because he refused to wear a mask.
I agree. We don't have
if he wasn't allowed to wear if he refused to wear a mask, but.
Right. We don't have a specific person specifically pointing to him. So, as I said, he may have been, I can't say for sure that he was. But we do know that this has happened. And one of the things that I really noticed, and I was surprised nobody talked about it on television, on Tuesday, when the voting was going on in Georgia, was that when you looked at the pictures of the lines, about every third or fourth or fifth person in line was not wearing a mask. And I'm guessing that those were Trump humpers who were showing up in order to intimidate Democrats who might be afraid of the coronavirus to not vote. Now, it didn't seem to me like anybody was intimidated. People were keeping their distance from these maskless people in line in Georgia. And every single maskless person I saw looked like a middle-aged white man. I'm with you. I think it is assault. I really do. Thanks a lot for the call, Justin. Jared in Downington, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jared, what's up?
I've been having the week from hell, Tom. My uncle just got COVID. My aunt just got COVID. My cousin just got COVID. My brother, who went to Afghanistan under Donald Trump, the anti-war president, remember that? He went to Afghanistan to fight a war. He has PTSD, and he's now in a VA mental asylum at the moment because he was thinking about killing himself. And then I get this news about the, this I don't really want to call him a man anymore. He's very limp. He has a very tiny phallus, to say the least.
Who's the he you're talking about, Jared?
You know who I'm talking about? The orange
well, I couldn't tell if it was Trump or Pence,
one.
but yeah, okay. Yeah,
the orange. No. He's his own thing. He reminds me of a man who likes to watch his wife know another.
Yeah, let's not go there, Jared.
Man.
Let's just not go there. It's I think there are reasonable limits to how we engage in character assassination, and I think the important point here is not whether or not Donald Trump is a manly man. He's obviously not. Wearing makeup and diapers and lifts in his shoes, but it is whether or not he's a fascist, and I think it's very clear that he is, and he's leading a fascist movement. Jared, I'm so sorry to hear about your relatives. I hope everybody makes it through, and I hope you do, and stay safe, Jared. Thanks a lot for the call. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Anything Goes Friday, although the next hour will be Congressman Ro Khanna, California Congressman Ro Khanna, all hour. And he represents California in the U.S. House. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Business by Christopher Leonard. This is from the prologue. It's titled The Hidden King. Nobody ever visits the stranded little community of Waldron, Arkansas. But even if they did, a tourist would never see the place for what it really is. Most outsiders would be fooled into thinking it was an actual small town. On any given morning, the residents awaken and begin their routine along Main Street. Old men park their pickup trucks by the curb in front of the Rock Cafe, which opens early for breakfast. As the cafe's booths and tables fill up, a congregation of old-timers in cowboy hats gathers in a loose ring of aluminum chairs out front, smoking and talking and stubbing out their cigarette butts in a bucket full of sand. Later in the morning, Chambers Bank in the south end of town opens up, and the tellers cheerfully greet customers by name. On Thursday at noon, the livestock auction opens in a cavernous barn on the north side of town, drawing crowds of ranchers who haul steel trailers behind their trucks, with cows staring out between the horizontal slats. In the late afternoon, teenagers park their cars by the gazebo south of the auction barn, proudly displaying their Mustangs and Broncos like big game trophies. These events have a rhythm of their own, the clockwork functioning of a small town economy. But it's all just window dressing. All of it would cease to exist in a moment and have no impact whatsoever on the true Waldron or its true economic reason for being. The real tempo of the town's economic pulse is measured by the coming and going of semi-trucks that roll down Main Street at periodic intervals, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the middle of the night, tanker trucks full of animal feed rumble past the empty stores and out onto country roads that lead into the hilly terrain that surrounds town. At dawn, other trucks trundle in from the hills, heaped high with battered metal crates full of chickens that exude clouds of white feathers along the highway. The tempo can be measured in the regular arrival of train cars full of grain and oil seeds that dump their loads at a feed mill that clanks and hums and churns all night. And in the parade of refrigerated trucks that pull up to a slaughterhouse near the feed mill and get loaded with pallets of frozen meat. This is the real functioning of Waldron, Arkansas, and its true reason for being. This is the heartbeat of Tyson Foods, the nation's biggest meat company. The Tyson plant on the north end of Waldron is the only thing that keeps the town on the map. Appropriately, many residents simply refer to it as the complex. That's because the Tyson plant isn't just a factory, it's more like an entire small town economy consolidated into one property. The complex contains its own feed mill and hatchery, its own trucking line and slaughterhouse that covers several acres of land and processes about 1 million dead chickens a week. The complex is like an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses, an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses that used to define a small town like Waldron, the kinds of businesses that were once the economic pillars of rural America. Of course, tourists to Waldron would never see the Tyson plant, and not just because it sits on the north fringe of town away from Main Street. Visitors are stopped at its front gate and forbidden from exploring its grounds. So a tourist would have to be content to stroll along the sidewalks downtown, observing the fake Main Street, the deceptive array of little businesses that make it seem like a community. This illusory appearance cloaks Tyson's existence all the way from its roots in rural America to the grocery store shelves and restaurant menus where its products finally reach American consumers. The average shopper is usually fooled when he or she peruses the meat aisle, seeing what appears to be an abundance of choices and products. Tyson brand name wouldn't necessarily stand out with its logo gracing just a handful of products. But the rotisserie chicken slowly turning in its oven, the Bonisi brand pepperoni, the Lady Astor brand chicken cordon bleu, the frozen chicken pot pie, and the Wright brand bacon all come from the same company, Tyson. And then there is all the unlabeled meat that Tyson floods into the U.S. food system every day. The meat served in cafeterias, nursing homes, fast food restaurants, and suburban eateries where more and more Americans eat their meals. There's a very good chance any of the meat purchased in these places was made by Tyson. Even if Tyson did not produce a given piece of meat, the consumer is really only picking between different versions of the same commodified beef, chicken, and pork that is produced throughout a system that Tyson pioneered. Tyson's few competitors have resorted to imitating the company's business model just to survive. This book aims to explore the vast hidden territory between the remote farms and towns like Waldron, where Tyson raises millions of animals, and the final point of contact where consumers buy the company's meat. Unseen between these two poles is a hidden power structure that has quietly reshaped U.S. rural economies while gaining unprecedented control over the nation's meat supply. Just a handful of companies produce nearly all the meat consumed in the United States, and Tyson is the king among them. The company sits atop a powerful oligarchy of corporations that determines how animals are raised, how much farmers get paid, and how meat is processed, all while reaping massive profits and remaining almost entirely opaque to the consumer. Because Tyson and its imitators are based in the geographic and economic fringes of America in forgotten places like Waldron, the company has managed to escape the scrutiny it deserves. While Tyson's operations are remote, the company's business practices affect virtually everyone. About 95% of Americans eat chicken, which means they almost certainly eat chicken produced by Tyson. And then it goes on from there. The book is The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Industry by Christopher Leonard.
Coming up on the Science Revolution is Dr. Edwin C. May for an in-depth interview on how the federal government used ESP to spy on foreign governments. In brief, the U.S. military and intelligence communities funded a 20-year program to collect intelligence during the Cold War by using so-called psychics. Did it work? Was it successful? What happened and what can we learn from it? Dr. Edwin C. May also talks about the broader implications of ESP and psychics. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are found. Well, the stories are starting to come out now about, what happened in the Capitol building as these fascist thugs, killers. I mean, we lost 4 people in Benghazi. Hillary Clinton testified, well, I guess that was around her emails, or was that Benghazi? I don't remember, for 11 hours, They had all these congressional hearings, oh my God, for years and years. Benghazi, oh my God, 4 guys died. 5 people have died, maybe 6 people have died in the Capitol building now as a result of the stormtroopers, of these Nazis marching on the Capitol, occupying the Capitol. And now the staffers in Chuck Schumer's office are telling the New York Daily News that when these people broke into Schumer's office, they pooped in his office and then smeared it in the carpets and on the walls. These very fine people, Donald Trump's very fine people. It's mind-boggling. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Jose in Toledo, Ohio. Hey, Jose, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. I've been listening to all the interviews that have been made with all these people, big people, small people, and the recurring thing about this is not us. And my question is, how far in the ground has your head? This is America. It was built on hate, on violence, on racism. And now that it's kind of come to the surface, they're all surprised. Denial is comfortable. But looking at things with an honest eye is difficult. And I think America in general needs to wake up. This is America. And until we deal with it one-on-one, face-to-face, we're going to continue with this type of malarkey. I don't know how you feel, but I keep listening to these people, and I'm just amazed at how, well, I can't even say naive. I just say living in denial.
I agree with you, Jose, and I would add there is something deeply embedded in the DNA of humans, and probably in most mammals that are principally predators. It's kind of a hyena-like response where, everybody's nice and normal and just kind of milling around, and then, there's the smell of blood. And the head hyena says, oh, let's go get them. And suddenly 30 hyenas are descending on an injured deer, that kind of thing. And that's built into us. And so the head hyena in this case was Donald Trump, with a little help from his son and from his lawyer in that protest, and saying, okay, there's the wounded deer over there, let's go. And what happens is that our ability to inhibit our behavior, our normal inhibitions, start to fall away. And as they fall away, violence ensues. And that's what we saw. I mean, this is what you see in war as well, by the way. I would say that war is probably tapping that same thing deep in the genetic code of mammals in general and humans in particular. And that's why we have things like anti-riot laws. That's why, when people say, I'm going to read you the Riot Act, there literally is a piece of legislation called the Riot Act. And it not only makes it illegal to riot, but more importantly, it makes it illegal to incite a riot, because we understand that this is something that we are all capable of. And I'm concerned that had they been able, you've got these guys who are marching through the Capitol building, and these are reports from serious people. I mean, Reuters reporters and BBC reporters saying they were chanting, not BBC, it was one of the other British news crews, chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," and they had built a gallows out back. And it wouldn't surprise me if they had gotten their hands on Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, or Mike Pence, that might have been the end of them. And the other point that needs to be made is that there was a group of 4 young women, congressional pages, who rescued the ballots. These people knew where to go in the Capitol building to lay their hands on those ballots that Pence was just starting to open. They knew where to go, and they were trying to get those ballots. I believe that this was planned. I believe, this is just my personal opinion. We'll see if the evidence comes out over time. But it sure looks to me like this was planned, that these people were specifically looking for the ballots, and that they were specifically looking to take out Mike Pence and the Democratic leadership, so in the hopes that the Republican leadership would say, okay, we give it to Donald Trump. That's all right. Which is, by the way, how similar invasions of the Parliament building have played out in places like the eastern half of Ukraine, which is now pro-Russian. It's got a government now that's aligned with Putin's Russia, because that happened there. And that also arguably happened in Moscow many years ago. I mean, and it's happened in other countries around the world. It's happened in the Philippines. This is not something new, and it is something very dangerous, Jose. And so that's my rant on your comment. I'll give you the last word, and then I'm going to move along.
All right. I just feel that until we truly educate our children with the real history of what happens in the United States, we're gonna live on these myths of privilege, and things won't change. Thanks for the time.
I'm with
Tom.
you. And
by the way,
you're welcome. You're welcome.
The
Jose.
book Unsettled Truths, very good book.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll check it out. Thank you, Jose. Great to hear from you. And by the way, I'd say this is how lynch mobs get formed and happen. I mean, we have a long history of this in the United States, but the human race has a long history of this. Joel in Athens, Georgia. Hey, Joel, what's on your mind today?
Well, I'm concerned that I have not heard one mention by the legal analysts on any channel about Trump's exposure to felony murder charges. I'm a retired criminal defense lawyer, and I have defended my share of felony murder charges. And before I say any further, I just want to note that one defense that would be available to Trump would be the insanity defense. But further, anyway, anybody who aids...
How would you organize the charge, Joel?
Anybody, the law here in Georgia is that anybody aids, bets, and commits any act in furtherance of the commission of a felony is guilty of felony murder, which is guilty of murder. Now, there are a lot of counts that could be brought against Trump, Giuliani, Trump Jr., because what they did was clearly was meant to incite this riot. I don't see why it would be so hard to prove those things. But what I'm concerned about is I haven't mentioned felony murder. I haven't heard mention felony murder in any of the reports I've had on his exposure to criminal liability.
Joel, is felony murder, forgive me, I'm not a lawyer, is felony murder when a murder is committed in the commission of a felony, even though you're not the murderer? It's like, five guys rob a bank, one of them shoots the guard dead, but all five of them are now guilty of felony murder. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, even including the driver of the car who never goes in the bank.
Right, so they're all guilty of felony murder. So we've had 5 or 6 murders now, or deaths, several of them apparently murders, in the U.S. Capitol.
Right.
As the consequence of a felony, the breaking into the Capitol that was incited by Trump and his son. And you're suggesting that they can therefore be held equally culpable, responsible for those deaths. Is that the essence of what you're saying, Joel?
Exactly.
But who would bring those charges?
It doesn't matter that nobody actually killed those people who died of medical emergencies. What matters is that they died during the commission of a felony.
Right.
But
we've got a police officer.
Neither here nor there, but you got plenty on Trump. Got plenty on the police officer who.
But this is all federal property.
Yes.
And therefore, isn't the only agency that would have jurisdiction the Department of Justice? Wouldn't this be up to the FBI and the Attorney General to bring charges against these folks?
Yes, it would be.
Do you think that might be why the acting Attorney General, day before yesterday, said that he is not stopping an investigation into Trump's role in this?
That's exactly what I took that to mean, that he is going to look at all potential charges against all potential actors that he was implicit in that, saying that, including felony murder against Trump.
Yeah. Remarkable. Joel, thank you. Thank you for contributing to the conversation and bringing your legal expertise to it. I appreciate it. It's great to hear from you. Thank you very much. We'll be back. It's coming up on 15 minutes before the hour. Well, it is 15 minutes before the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday. Next hour, Congressman Khanna, representing the 17th District of California in the U.S. House of Representatives, Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, will be with us for the hour, taking your calls. Another progressive town hall meeting. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, fair and only slightly unbalanced. And welcome back, Mark Taylor Canfield in Seattle. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Good to talk to you. Despite everything that's happened,
back at you.
I hope you and your family had a happy holiday season and a good New Year.
So far, so good. And back at you, Mark. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, I lost a couple of family members this year, so I take personal offense to Republicans and government refusing to wear masks. Flaunting your irresponsibility is not impressive to me, but I didn't call.
You lost family members to COVID?
Issues. I didn't call to talk about that, Tom. I called to talk about what's happening in Washington, D.C., which is it's now been reported that one of the 5 people who were killed, who lost their lives, was a police officer. I also wanted to let people know that Trump announced on Twitter this morning that he will not attend the inauguration of Joe Biden. And yesterday I woke up to a press briefing by Mayor de Blasio and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and in those press briefings, the term fascism came up and the term terrorism came up. So that's the situation we're dealing with. And I doubt that we've ever seen such crass disrespect for the office of President of the United States of America from a former office holder. And I don't know how anyone with even an ounce of self-respect right now can remain a member of the Republican Party at a time when a thug like this is its leader. He's encouraged violence, and he's helped to usher in a fascist movement that threatens our democracy. And as executive director of Democracy Watch News, I must speak out against these attempts to subvert our democratic institutions. It is my job, and it's the job of every journalist, reporter, editor, publisher to speak for freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and democracy. And so we have to draw the line right here and cannot allow this kind of behavior by people in our government ever again, Tom. It's like worse than Nixon now. I can't believe what I'm seeing with my own eyes on a daily basis. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. This is something that, Mark, you and I and many others in the media have been warning about ever since 2015 when Donald Trump got into the primary, that he was his race-based fascistic arguments for his own candidacy, and including his inauguration, his inaugural speech where he talked about American carnage. This is something that we have seen before. We've seen it in the United States, in the Deep South, back prior to the Civil War, and frankly, following the Civil War, John C. Calhoun and friends. We've also seen it around the world. We saw it with the rise of Mussolini, of Hitler, of Franco, and others. And, in this hemisphere, in Chile. We have seen that with Pinochet. We have seen this over and over and over again, and have been trying to warn people for 5 years now. And I've been using the word fascist for 5 years now, and suddenly everybody's like, oh, really? Oh, wow. Well, maybe, could be. And, when countries realize too late that they've got a fascist uprising on their hands, or when they realize late in the game that they have a fascist uprising on their hands, more often than not, it's too late. And I'm just very, very hopeful it's not too late here and now, Mark, but it sure feels to me like it is. Mark Taylor Canfield in Seattle. Mark, keep up the great work. Great talking with you. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes, coming up on 10 minutes before the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. The True People's Media. Back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday right after this. The Hidden History of Monopoly tells how Robert Bork, that guy from the Reagan era, transformed corporate America and destroyed the American dream. For our video this week for supporters of our program, you can find it over at thomhartmann.com. We're talking about endocrine disruptors as modulators of obesity. This is, in fact, the title of the article in Cell Endocrinology was Endocrine Disruptors as Obesogens. Why is it that almost a third of Americans are obese? And that's not true of, say, Italians. And it turns out there's actually a single measurable, definable variable. There's a category, or actually several broad categories of chemicals that are found in the American food supply in particular places, and therefore fairly easy to avoid, that actually disrupt our endocrine system, our hormone system, and cause us to crave more food, to eat more food, and also downregulate our metabolism so that we burn less energy so that food gets stored as fat. You can check it out at thomhartmann.com. For 10 free... Welcome back to Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Fred in LaPorte, Indiana. Hey, Fred, what's on your mind?
Yes, I wondered I tell you, I'm appalled by what I saw at the Capitol, and I don't know why the National Guard and the Army and the Marine Corps wasn't called in to take care of that. They
weren't called in because Donald Trump told them to stand down, and orders were issued from the Department of Defense that they were not to go in unless the Secretary of Defense signed off on it, which he never did.
I think he made a mistake.
It was the Secretary of the Army who ultimately called up the mayor of Washington, D.C. and said, you may have some National Guard troops. It was the Secretary of the Army. He didn't even have the authority to do it. The presidential order was that only the Secretary of Defense could do that, but he did it anyway, the Secretary of the Army. The Secretary of Defense never said a word. That's why what happened the way it happened, Fred.
All our leaders in there, other than the president, who was home watching it on television, I'm sure, with a big smile on his face.
You bet.
That It just upset me. I'm 81, and I've seen a lot of things, and I never thought I'd ever see anything like that.
Yep.
I called.
Well, we haven't seen the Capitol building being stormed since 1814. I'm sorry, Fred. Go ahead.
So I really called about to see what you thought about this Tytler cycle of democracy, only lasting around 200 years. This guy, I'm sure you've heard of him and know about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But and he wrote this back around 1776, as far as I can figure, and he goes through these 9 steps, and I see our society has gone through, just in my time, some of these last selfishness, complacency, apathy, and the last one's dependency, which I hope we're not going to run into with too much social welfare. But then after dependency, it goes back to usually a dictatorship.
Well, let me just speak to that, if I may, Fred. Alexander Fraser Tytler was an economist who died in 1813. He was Scottish. He was not an American. He was a lawyer. He was a writer, and he spoke about economics. He did not write that quote that is continuously attributed to him. That quotation came from a couple of other sources. It was actually written by Hennings W. Prentice Jr., president of the Armstrong Cork Company and the president of the National Association of Manufacturers, which today is one of the largest right-wing lobbying groups in Washington, D.C. It was in an address that Prentice gave in 1943 called The Cult of Competency, and then was published in the General Magazine and Historical Chronicle of the Alumni Society of the University of Pennsylvania. And what he said, and I'll just quote it. This is what Prentice, the business lobbyist, said. He said, a democracy is always temporary in nature. It simply cannot exist as a permanent form of government. That is not true, by the way. We don't know if that's true or not. A democracy, he said, will continue to exist up until the time the voters discover they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury. That is not true. What we have seen in democracy after democracy after democracy all around the world is that when the majority votes, they will vote for a social safety net, but they do not vote to give themselves everything. This is a fantasy that right-wing businessmen love to promote. It continues. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates who promise the most benefits to the public treasury, with the result that every democracy will finally collapse due to loose fiscal policy, which is always followed by dictatorship. That is not true. And in fact, we have seen that, year after year after year in the advanced democracies around the world for over 200 years now. It's simply not true. And then he goes on to say the average age of the world's greatest civilization since the beginning of history has been about 200 years. That is not true. The Roman Empire lasted over 1,000 years. During those 200 years, these nations always progressed through the following sequence. And then he goes from bondage to spiritual faith. Spiritual faith has never been found to play any role in a functioning democracy, whether it functions or not. In the Northern European countries, there's virtually no church attendance. It's ceremonial. It's for weddings and things. Then from spiritual faith to great courage. Well, what the hell does great courage mean? From courage to liberty. How do you define liberty? Again, this is a speech given by the guy who was the president of the National Association of Manufacturers. In their mind, liberty means companies get to do whatever they want and they get to screw their workers. He gave this speech, by the way, during a time when he was fighting against unionization in the United States, the guy who gave this speech. From liberty to abundance. Okay, yeah, this was in the 1950s when the actual speech that was, 1943, when the American middle class was growing substantially, largely as a result of Franklin Roosevelt. This was an attack on FDR's policies, by the way. From liberty to abundance, from abundance to complacency, I'm not noticing any complacency. From complacency to apathy, what does that mean? From apathy to dependence, from dependence back into bondage. It's something that the right-wing business people love to promote. But Alexander Fraser Tytler had nothing to do with this. It was a speech given by a lobbyist, the president of a lobbying organization, a century and a half after Tytler died. Back to you, Fred. You got about 10 seconds.
The only thing with the apathy, I can see that here years back, people were saying, it doesn't do any good for me to vote, so I'm not going to vote. Now, that's where I got the apathy. And I see in my time the dependency. I don't know. I see more social programs coming up, and I'm hoping if he did, well, that shows you can't believe any damn thing you read on the internet.
That's true, Fred. That's absolutely true. And I've had this Tytler quote here sitting on my desk for about 2 weeks because I was going to do a rant about it because it's making a resurgence now in right-wing circles.
Fred, thank you very much for the call. And thanks for setting me up for that. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code TOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code TOM.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Ezra Klein's new book, Why We're Polarized. This is from the introduction, and it's a couple pages into it. I'm starting out here. I have found that American politics is best understood by braiding two forms of knowledge that are often left separate: the direct on-the-ground insights shared by politicians, activists, government officials, and other subjects of my reporting, and the more systemic analyses conducted by political scientists, sociologists, historians, and others with the time, methods, and expertise to study American politics at scale. On their own, political actors often ignore the incentives shaping their decisions, and academic researchers miss the human motivations that drive political decision-making. Together, however, they shine bright light on how and why American politics works the way it does. There's much awry in American politics, and I won't in this book attempt to catalog all of it. But I've come to believe the master story, the one that drives almost all divides and most fundamentally shapes the behavior of participants, is the logic of polarization. That logic, put simply, is this: to appeal to a more polarized public, political institutions and political actors behave in more polarized ways. As political institutions and actors become more polarized, they further polarize the public. This sets off a feedback cycle. To appeal to a yet more polarized public, institutions must polarize further. When faced with yet more polarized institutions, the public polarizes further, and so on. Understanding that we exist in relationship with our political institutions, that they are changed by us and we are changed by them, is the key to this story. We don't just use politics for our own ends. Politics uses us for its own ends. There are many different types of polarization possible, and I'll discuss some of them later in the book, but the locus of polarization I'll discuss is on political identity. And that requires saying a few words about a term that should be very useful in American politics, but that has become almost useless: identity politics. A core argument of this book is that everyone engaged in American politics is engaged in identity politics. This is not an insult, and it's not controversial. We form and fold identities constantly, naturally. Identity is present in politics in the way gravity, evolution, or cognition is present in politics. That is to say, it is omnipresent in politics because it is omnipresent in us. There is no way to read the literature on how humans form and protect their personal and group identities, literature I will survey in this book, and believe that any of us is immune. It runs so deep in our psyches, so activated so easily by even weak cues and distant threats, that it is impossible to speak seriously about how we engage with one another without discussing how our identities shape that engagement. Unfortunately, the term identity politics has been weaponized. It is most often used by speakers to describe politics as practiced by members of historically marginalized groups. If you're black and you're worried about police brutality, that's identity politics. If you're a woman and you're worried about the male-female pay gap, that's identity politics. But if you're a rural gun owner decrying universal background checks as tyranny, or a billionaire CEO complaining that high tax rates demonize success, or a Christian insisting on nativity scenes in public squares, well, that's just good old-fashioned politics. With a quick sleight of hand, identity becomes something that only marginalized groups have. The term identity politics in this usage obscures rather than illuminates. It's used to diminish and discredit the concerns of weaker groups by making them look self-interested. Special pleading in order to clear the agenda for the concerns of stronger groups, which are framed as more rational, proper topics for normal political debate. But in wielding identity as a blade, we have lost it as a lens, blinding ourselves in a bid for political advantage. We're left searching in vain for what we refuse to allow ourselves to see. All politics is influenced by identity. Those identities are most powerful when they are so pervasive as to be either invisible or uncontroversial. American is an identity. So too is Christian. When politicians, including the irreligious, end speeches with "God bless America," it's not because they're making an appeal to a higher power, but because they're making an appeal to our bedrock identities. If you don't believe me, ask yourself why there are so few open atheists or even agnostics in national politics. This does not mean that politics is an equation solved by locating identity. Identity shapes our worldview, but it does not mechanistically decide it. And while we often speak of identity as a singular, it is always a dizzying plural. We have countless identities, some of them in active conflict with each other, others lying dormant until activated by threat or fortune. Much that happens in political campaigns is best understood as a struggle over which identities voters will inhabit come election day. Will they feel like workers exploited by their bosses, or heartlanders dismissed by coastal elites? Will they vote as patriotic traditionalists offended by NFL players who kneel during the national anthem, or as parents worried about the climate their children will inhabit? What we are often fighting over in American politics is group identity and status. Fights that express themselves in debates over policy and power, but cannot be truly reconciled by either. Health policy is positive sum, but identity conflict is zero sum. The book Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, it's come to this. Nancy Pelosi, this has been reported by CNN. Nancy Pelosi said, and I quote, "This morning I spoke to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, to discuss available precautions for preventing an unstable president from initiating military hostilities or accessing the launch codes and ordering a nuclear strike." The Speaker of the House is working with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to prevent the President of the United States from nuking somebody, perhaps even us. That's what we've come to. On the line with us for the hour is Representative Ro Khanna, representing the 17th District of California, the Silicon Valley area, in the U.S. House of Representatives, the Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And Congressman Khanna, we haven't had an opportunity to talk in person or even over the phone or anything since everything went down on Wednesday. I don't know if you want to relate any of your experiences to us or not, but I would love to hear your thoughts on what happened then, where we're at, and where we go forward. And then, by the way, let me just say to everybody listening that Congressman Khanna is with us for the entire hour, and he will be taking your calls at 202-808-9925 for that hour. Congressman?
Well, Tom, thank you. It was a horrific day to see the assault on our Capitol, an assault that Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani explicitly incited. And the irony is, if you look at who they were actually going after, Donald Trump Jr. is saying, please go teach the Republican lawmakers a lesson. So the invasion was actually targeted at the Republicans who were not willing to object to the election. I was in my office building in Cannon. We got an evacuation alert because apparently there was a lead pipe bomb nearby. I went out of my building along with many people and started to head towards the Capitol, thinking that would be safe. And then, fortunately, before I went into the Capitol, I got frantic texts saying the building has been overrun. Go back right away to your office in Cannon. And so several of us, ran back to the Cannon building. We were told that it was clear of bombs, but it wasn't fully no one had time to fully see if that had been the case. And so then I just went into my office and locked my office and stayed there till the middle of the night. But I think what is so disturbing is I don't remember another time in history where you've had a president of the United States incite violence against an institution of our democracy, and it's really just outrageous.
To say the very least. And before we pick up calls, any further thoughts or things that you wanted to point out with regard to anything, impeachment or anything else?
Sure. Well, I actually just jumped off the caucus call with the speaker to do this show, but we were talking about the next steps, and I think the consensus of the caucus is that he has to be impeached and he has to be removed from office. You can't have a president of the United States incite violence and allow him to remain. And so the ideal situation would be that McConnell or some of the Republicans who were targets of the attack would go to the president and say, look, the votes are there. You're going to be impeached. You ought to resign. But I'm doubtful that would happen, and we haven't seen any strong condemnations of the president's conduct from the other side yet. And so I think we have to proceed with the vote on impeachment. Now, the trial may actually end up happening after the president leaves. Because McConnell will have a lot of discretion. But it's still, in my view, important to have the trial whenever it happens and to make it clear that this president did something that is intolerable in American democracy.
Yeah. If it's post noon on the 20th and the Senate votes to remove him from office, I don't understand how that works. I mean,
well, presumably, now one of their arguments would be, well, it's moot. He's already left. But right. we could argue no. It matters that he be formally impeached, and it was initiated before when he was in office. And the reason it matters is that it would bar him from seeking office in the future if he's actually impeached. And so you may have the Republicans, some of them, try to acquit him on the view that it's a moot point. But there is a material difference to being impeached, even if the resolution is afterwards. And the biggest difference is that he wouldn't be able to run for federal office again.
Right. And he would be basically convicted of the crimes that he was, because an impeachment is an indictment. Is there any discussion in the caucus about whether this would effectively prevent him from issuing any more pardons?
Well, I think if he were removed, obviously he wouldn't be able to give pardons, and that's one reason to push for the 25th Amendment and push for impeachment. The challenge is just that even if we impeached him tomorrow in the House, which I think we should, if the 25th Amendment option isn't there and he's not willing to resign, that McConnell has a large discretion on the clock, and he may delay the trial in a way that Trump is still able to pardon. But I think you hit the nail on the head of why Trump gave that video now saying he's going to have a smooth transition and everything else. He wants to still pardon people, and he wants to retain the presidency the next 13 days. And he was told that if you don't do this, you may actually have the Republicans call for your resignation.
Yeah, what I was specifically referencing was the clause in Article 2 that gives the president the power of impeachment, says except in cases, the power of pardons, that he may exercise that power except in cases of impeachment. And I realize that's never been adjudicated, and there's some debate over what that means. Does that mean that he can't pardon somebody who has been impeached, or does that mean that he loses the ability to pardon as soon as the House has impeached him, and even before the Senate trial? Because if you go back to the debates among the founders, or the framers rather, there was a debate about, or a discussion about, how do you prevent the president from using his pardon power to prevent his collaborators in a crime from testifying against him. But this has never been adjudicated by the Supreme Court. Is there any sense of what that means?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I assume, my guess is they would argue it relates to the pardoning of people who are relevant to the impeachment trial. So he couldn't pardon someone who's going to testify that he incited violence. But whether it restricts his broader pardon powers before being convicted, I mean, I think we could try to make that argument. And like you said, it's never been adjudicated, and it would probably go to the court. And maybe the court, if it did find that he couldn't pardon in that case, those pardons wouldn't be effective.
Yeah. That seems like an area that's really worth focusing on, because what I'm hearing is that the legal scholar debate is, okay, in cases of impeachment, does that apply to his pardoning people who've been impeached? Does that mean that he loses that power of pardon the minute that the House votes to impeach him? Does it mean that he doesn't? Well, obviously, it wouldn't mean he loses the pardon power when the Senate has convicted him, because he's no longer president, so he couldn't do it anyway. Which would suggest that it would mean once the House has impeached him, that he loses the impeachment power. But I don't know.
It's a fascinating point, and I'll bring it up with the caucus after this program. I'll be back onto the caucus. I'll bring it up.
Thanks, and let me know what the consensus is. I'd love to hear it. Okay, we will pick up phone calls for Congressman Ro Khanna for the rest of the hour here, and I'll get myself out of the way and let you talk with him. We'll be right back. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Representative Ro Khanna, his Twitter handle is Rep Ro Khanna, and you can find his email at Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. And welcome back. John in Los Angeles, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Rep Ro Khanna, I have a question for you about the filibuster. I know the gist of it is to be used to help block, but once the filibuster is enacted, how do you get around that?
How do you get around the filibuster if we can't get rid of it? Is that the...
Right. That was the essence of his question, as I understood it.
Yeah. I mean, first, I think we have to try to get rid of it. And, Manchin, is my understanding, is expressed an openness, a willingness to look at it. And so we now have the votes if we exercise it to get rid of the filibuster. If you don't get rid of the filibuster, then you're much more constrained. Now, you have a situation of budget reconciliation, which is how Trump got the tax cuts through, and how they plan to actually repeal the Affordable Care Act was also through the budget reconciliation process, which only requires 51 votes. And we would have to be creative in pushing as much of our legislation through a budget reconciliation process that would require 51 votes and not 60 votes. I mean, one of the things McConnell really perfected was the arcane procedural maneuvers to give his caucus every advantage, and it's something that we should do on our side to make sure that we're looking at every possible way to get our legislation through.
Anthony in Detroit, Michigan, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, Representative Khanna and Tom. I saw on the opening day of Congress that you tweeted, Representative Khanna, that there would be in the Energy and Commerce Committee maybe some fixes being brought to change the ACA. So I was wondering what those were, and then you also said maybe progressives can demand a Medicare for All vote within that committee process. So could you enlighten us?
Anthony, it's a great question. I appreciate you following my Twitter. What I was saying is that there are a number of places where we can force a Medicare for All vote. One of the things that I am positive that the Biden administration will want to do is fix some of the ACA issues. Right now, if you're particularly a family that's low income, the subsidies are simply not enough to get any kind of affordable insurance. And so if they come and say, well, we want to increase the subsidies for families, which is important, well, a lot of that money is going to go into the pocket of insurance companies. And that's a time we can say, well, we want a vote on Medicare for All, and we want amendments and options that will move us to the direction of Medicare for All, in addition to having a vote on Medicare for All. My point was we should not consider just fixes for the ACA without having the alternative debated and discussed, which is that why a public single-payer system is the best system for the country.
What's your sense? We just have 30 seconds. What's your sense of where the Democratic caucus overall is at with regard to Medicare for All?
I think you still have about 120 of us who are for it. It's sad that it hasn't built more. I mean, in a pandemic, in a health crisis, this should be the time in a functioning democracy where you would get Medicare for All, but we're still not there.
Yeah, unfortunate. Representative Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour. Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov is his website. You can tweet him at Rep Ro Khanna. We'll be right back. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. Did you know that there have been 8 federal judges who have been convicted and removed from the federal bench? 15 altogether have been impeached. 8 have been removed from office since the beginning. 3 of them since 1988, including one judge, Thomas Porteous down in Louisiana, who was impeached and removed from office for signing false financial declarations under penalty of perjury, which it turns out it looks like Clarence Thomas did for quite a number of years when he did not disclose, as he is required by law to do, that his wife was taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Heritage Foundation. That and his perjury around Anita Hill and others, there were numerous witnesses that didn't even get called, could legitimately spark an impeachment of Clarence Thomas. We got a video about this over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. Check it out. Representative Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour. And Mary in St. Louis, Missouri, you're on the air with Rep. Khanna.
Hi, Tom, and thank you for taking my call. Hi, Representative Khanna. My question is, why did it take so long for Nancy Pelosi to file the impeachment, start the impeachment proceedings? In my humble opinion, that should have been done the next morning at the latest. She said that, she wanted to give Mike Pence a chance to do the 25th Amendment. But this is the man that whenever Donald Trump took his water off of the table, he took his water off the table. He has so much admiration for him that even that Donald Trump sounds like set those people to kill him, to keep him from certifying the election, he still won't do it. And I could have told him that. I could have told her, that's a waste of time right there. So I just want to know what you think about that.
Well, Mary, I agree with you that we should be moving now. I think her view practically is that if we impeach today, the Senate will drag its feet and we won't have a resolution of actually the president being removed from office. And so it would be symbolic, which is important, but it wouldn't achieve the end of removing the president. And she wanted to give some time or some pressure to McConnell, Republican leaders, and the vice president, who actually do have the power to get him to resign or to remove. But I agree with you that we should be having the vote as soon as possible to impeach.
Josh in St. Petersburg, Florida. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hey, Representative Khanna, what's up, Tom? Quick thing on the Mike Pence thing. The only thing that I could think of is he's one of these religious, just off the wall. I think he honestly either believes either God was going to protect him in some way, or he's just like the rest of the Republican Party. He's under the control of these corporations who are working through these the strategists to basically just say everybody on the left is insane. They want Medicare for all. They want socialism. They want all this stuff, which is destroys their corporate profits and all of that. So, in my opinion, that's just he's just having his strings pulled by those up the top. But the thing that I wanted to ask you, Representative Khanna, there on the Independent. I'm on the article right now. There was a Proud Boy at the White House. The article is dated December 15th. Supposedly did not meet with the president, just got a personal tour. But is that something you're going to be focusing on in any supposed investigations? Because, as Tom said in the first hour, they knew what they were doing. They knew the layout of the building. They knew they were looking for the ballots. They knew where they were going. That's conspiracy for treason if there was any sort of coordination between either the president and this Proud Boy, or somebody who spoke to the president and then met with this Proud Boy, in your opinion, no?
Well, you're absolutely right that we have to investigate what the White House's role was, how coordinated it was. I mean, the videos of seeing them dancing while the rioters are outside the Capitol is horrific for anyone who hasn't seen the president and his family in a tent dancing and joking around while you have the assault on the Capitol. And you're right that it was very systemic. I mean, the whip, Jim Clyburn's office, was in a obscure place in the Capitol on the third floor. In fact, I've never even been up there. The fact that the protesters would go there, he's the senior African-American in Congress, and that they wouldn't go to Hoyer's office or some of the other offices, I don't think that was by coincidence. I personally think he was targeted. And so these are people who, this was not a random mob that just went and destroyed things. They had a very concerted plan of who to target and what they were doing. And that has to be investigated. And we have to look at whether law enforcement was complicit, certain parts of law enforcement, and who else directed it.
Kevin in Collinsville, Illinois. We have 1 minute to the break, Kevin. Quick one, please.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Congressman Khanna, I've been devastated ever since Jared Kushner got his clearance from Trump. And then you recall Trump yanked the clearance from Bill Brennan, Bill Clapper, and so many countless others. My question is, can and should Joe Biden, when on day one of his presidency, yank the clearance from Donald Trump, Mike Pence, Jared Kushner, Hope Hicks, and everybody? That's my question.
Yes, Kevin, I think so. And I don't know the legality of the yanking the clearance from Trump himself, though I think we should. And this may be another reason to impeach him. And in that impeachment may trigger the revocation of access to national intelligence.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really strong rationale for even a conviction in the Senate after he's left office. I hadn't even considered that. That's brilliant. Representative Ro Khanna is with us for the hour, Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents the 17th District in California. His website is Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can tweet him at RepRo, R-O,
You're
RepRo
listening
Khanna.
to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And we will be back with more of your calls for Representative Khanna in our National Progressive Town Hall meeting right after this.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice I said to the people, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human. Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. You are not welcome here, he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ, wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Doomed verses would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Nicholas authored another bull. The book is Unsettling Truths by Charles and Ra.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for the folks who support our program, and it's about exactly why rich people, I'm talking about people who make more than $1 million a year marginally, and over $3 million a year, you know, that group totally, why this group of people who are multi-millionaires and are literally bringing into the house over $1 million a year and over $3 million a year, why would they want to destroy Obamacare? Turns out there's a very simple answer, and a very straightforward answer, and a rather shocking answer, that they would put all this time and effort, years of work, into trying to kill Obamacare and throw 20, 30, 40,000 million people, off their health care. And you can see it, hear it, read all about it, as it were, over at thomhartmann.com in our new members-only video. Representative Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour here on our National Progressive Town Hall meeting on the Thom Hartmann Program. And Jeanette in Spirit Lake, Idaho, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Oh, thank you so much for your time and service, both of you. I have an idea for legislation that I would call transparency in policy, which would say that a bill that passes either half of Congress must get a vote in the other, because, you know, the obstruction by McConnell has kept voters in the dark, right? I mean, all of the Republicans that I've talked to agree that we need to end, you know, tax subsidies to big oil, but they have no idea that the Democrats, you know, under Obama passed a bill to do that. So, you know, I think this would give incumbents a better record that voters can use to decide. You know, that's why I would call it transparency in policy. Do you think that is viable?
That's a great idea, actually, Jeanette, that if a bill passes one of the chambers, it should be required that you get an up or down vote on the other chamber, and that seems to me a very thoughtful, constructive proposal for reform.
Paul in Woodinville, Washington, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Thank you, Tom. I wanted to, as a reminder, that Mitch McConnell accused Nancy Pelosi of dragging her feet in delivering articles of impeachment the first time. So the fact that there are only 12 days left in Donald Trump's term is not a reason to delay. It's a reason to expedite the delivery of the articles, which should be by tonight. and they should be voted on by Sunday morning. They should be on Mitch McConnell's desk, and let him say, oh, it's, I want him to say it's delayed. And how long did that sham no evidence trial take last time anyway? 2 days? The 25th Amendment can be used concurrently with impeachment to suspend Donald Trump's powers of the president. And, of course, the impeachment itself, without conviction or before conviction, has its effects as well. So I don't see the delay. And, Congressman, I got to tell you, I don't think I speak just for myself when I say that the American people need to see the Congress stand up for itself. You were attacked. The executive branch of this nation attacked the legislative branch. That's not sedition. That's an act of civil war. And we need to see that you're going to stand up. If you can't stand up for yourselves, how are you going to stand up for us?
Well, I respect your passion. I agree with you that we ought to have a vote on impeachment. We need to do it now. We need to push McConnell to be clear where he stands. And there's nothing on what you said that I disagree with in terms of having a vote and having it expeditiously.
Tom in Marquette, Michigan. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hello, Representative. Thank you for your service. Tom, thank you very much for taking my call again. My question is this. Is there some less invasive way to stop the president from doing anything else harmful by detaining him in the same way that I might be detained on the road if I'm suspected of doing something back down the road that caused that was a criminal or suspected of being criminal? Could the president be detained?
The president, well, it's very hard to pursue that when he is the sitting president, and as a practical matter, you're not going to get Bill Barr to order that. But certainly the president's conduct in inciting violence should be reviewed by the Justice Department and could be criminal. I mean, it's something that has to be reviewed. You're not allowed to incite violence or incite unlawful conduct. And here you don't have some amorphous call. You have him saying go to the Capitol, and hours later people invading the Capitol. So there's a direct connection.
John in San Francisco, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hello, Representative Khanna. I've called Tom in this program for 4 years now about writing up a legal document to allow the rendition of anyone who's a domestic threat to the presidency and our democracy. And I don't think we need to write anything up. I think we need to do the rendition right now. What is your thoughts on this? And we could take them to Guantanamo Bay very conveniently along with Vice President Pence. Your thoughts?
On whether we need to write up impeachment articles or do something without that? I mean,
he's talking about arresting Trump and taking him to Gitmo. I think it's an over-the-top expression of how outraged people are, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the outrage, I think what we don't want to do is act in ways that don't respect the rule of law. That's the difference between us and Trump. We believe in the rule of law. We believe in the process. And I believe in this case the rule of law is very powerful and would find culpability and would get us the outcome we need. But we need to proceed on that.
Adam in New Orleans, you're on the air with Rep. Khanna.
Thanks so much. In my view, members of Congress were just lucky on Tuesday. Listening to the governor of Maryland, 2 hours were lost trying to get the Secretary of Defense to allow the National Guard to mobilize. He was missing in action. The Secretary of the Army stepped in, providing that approval. Will the Secretary of Defense be held responsible for delaying National Guard deployment? I mean, it was outrageous.
It is outrageous. I heard an hour and a half of delay after the governor of Maryland wanted the National Guard there, and after Steny Hoyer was basically pleading to send the National Guard. That delay is inexcusable, and again, that it needs to be investigated. Why was there that delay? Was it the defense secretary? Was it Trump? I mean, who was delaying the call to send the National Guard? We need that to be investigated as well.
Scott in Thomasville, Georgia. You are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Thank you, Tom, for taking my call. I have a kind of a technical question, and involves Medicare and Medicaid. I've been in the insurance business for 20 years, so I'm pretty familiar with that. And one thing I know, Medicare and Medicaid does not reimburse providers or doctors and hospitals. They do not reimburse them at market rates. In many cases, they pay less than cost. So essentially what you end up having, and especially it's really hit over the last 10 years, it wasn't that bad an idea back in 1975 when they started doing that. But now you basically have a hidden tax for the consumer, which could be somebody through Obamacare or could be through a large group plan or a self-pay person, because they have to pay more. If I'm a self-pay, I have to pay more for my care than the government would pay for somebody that was on Medicare or Medicaid. And so we're
Scott, what's your question?
The provider. So my question is, why do we do it that way? We're talking about expanding Medicare, and instead of expanding something, go ahead and at least start paying the full cost as opposed to putting the cost on the American people. So that's my question.
Thank you.
Well, I think this is an argument that you're making for why we need to expand Medicare, because the Medicare costs are much less than the cost for self-care or the cost for private insurance, and we ought to have everyone on Medicare. And then if we need to increase the reimbursement rates because hospitals may need that, we can do that. But it shouldn't be that the burden is falling on people who are in self-care or on a private insurance, companies with private insurance actually is hurting small business. So your argument is one of standardizing the process, which is what a single-payer system would be.
Representative Khanna, we just have 45 seconds. This is a strong argument, is it not, for Medicare for All, in as much as once everybody has the same system or the same program, it's going to be really hard for that program not to do a good job. There will be huge outrage across the American population. And this is why, single-payer systems in other countries tend to work really well, because everybody's in. Right now, it's just old folks, and they're not that big a lobby. Your thoughts?
You're actually right. And my experience is that most people who are on Medicare are pretty happy with it. So, yes, it put more pressure because you're going to have everyone in. And you're going to have a system that most people like more than the private insurance, because every doctor is considered in network.
Yeah. I'm on Medicare. I love it. And just for the record, Congressman Ro Khanna is with us for the hour, taking your calls in a national progressive town hall meeting here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. You can find his website at Khanna, Khanna, Khanna.house.gov. You can tweet him at RepRoKhanna.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And Representative Khanna is one of the vice chairs of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and represents the 17th District of California in the U.S. House. And welcome back. Barbara in Kingston, New York. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon, and I'm really glad that you're safe from the event. But can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, Barbara.
Oh, okay. So, other callers have voiced what I want to say, which is, why hasn't the people responsible for sedition been arrested? Okay, you answer the question by saying we have to follow rule of law. I'm a mother and a grandmother. There is a law that supersedes the slow process of our legislative process, and that is the preservation of life. So from where I'm looking and what I saw on social media, number 45, 126 Congress people and the D.C. police created a situation that endangered life. And myself and my friends We do not feel like we have a functioning government until that person and the person responsible are contained. They are not contained, which leaves us liable for more violence. So I'd like you to answer why these people have not been arrested.
Barbara, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of people who should be arrested who are still out there. I mean, there were hundreds of people in the Capitol, thousands, but hundreds who were destroying property, who had arms. I mean, anyone who brought an armed weapon into the Capitol has broken the law, and all of them should be arrested. We have video and footage of most of these people because there are a lot of cameras in the Capitol, and I think that has to be a high priority of the new police chief, because we're going to have a new Capitol Police chief to figure out and work with federal law enforcement in making these arrests.
Sally in Roundup, Montana, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my call, Representative. I'd like to know something. What happened at the Capitol and the president's egging it on and promoting it? Isn't this called treason? I think it's called treason. I'm not stupid. Why isn't he put in jail? He's dangerous. The whole world is laughing at us, and I have a gut feeling that we're going to get attacked because we are now considered weak. Thank you for your listening.
I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a common refrain amongst your audience, Tom, that people want this president removed. They want it done fast. One of the things I've called for is we need to reconvene. I'm still in Washington, but Congress shouldn't be adjourned. We ought to be reconvening. We ought to be taking up the articles of impeachment. So I am in 100% agreement with all of the reasons your callers are giving.
We just have 20 seconds. Can Congress be reconvened virtually? Is it possible that Nancy Pelosi can call a virtual congressional session for this purpose?
We can. We do have virtual calls. We were just having one this afternoon. But in terms of actually voting, we need to be in person to vote. You can vote proxy, but you still need a core group of people in Washington, and Congress has to be physically present to do that.
Yeah, okay. Representative Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. He represents the 17th District of California, the Silicon Valley area, in the U.S. House of Representatives, Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. His website, Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can tweet him at RepRo, Rep Ro Khanna. We'll be right back. Coming up on the Science Revolution is Dr. Edwin C. May for an in-depth interview on how the federal government used ESP to spy on foreign governments. In brief, the U.S. military and intelligence communities funded a 20-year program to collect intelligence during the Cold War by using so-called psychics. Did it work? Was it successful? What happened and what can we learn from it? Dr. Edwin C. May also talks about the broader implications of ESP and psychics. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are found. Welcome back. Representative Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour. National Progressive Town Hall meeting. Mike in Hope Sound, Florida. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
What a pleasure to talk on this day, Congressman and Tom. Hillary Clinton sat for 11 hours for Benghazi hearings when 4 Americans were killed, a tragedy that she did not incite. I expect somebody in Congress in the next several days to call for Trump's physical presence before or after his impeachment to answer to this incitement. Furthermore, I'd like to know how many active duty or off-duty police and military were actually part of that mob, because there were there. And my final question is, there's no point in impeaching Trump again unless they impeach Pence. They gave him 24 hours to invoke the 25th, and Pence gave his answer. So I'd like to have a response to that. Thank you, gentlemen.
I agree with you that we need to have answers from Trump, and I think having a committee hearing and calling him before that is a very reasonable idea. I do think Pence, I think the ability to impeach both of them is going to be limited before the end of the term, and Pence at least has recognized the election results. So my view is having Pence there for 13 days is far, far better than having Donald Trump there, and we ought to focus on removing Trump.
Jim in Tallahassee, Florida, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Thank you for everything you do, Representative. We have been suffering for a couple decades from a Justice Department regulation that has never been tested under law. And I'm wondering if this is not the perfect opportunity to find out whether the president, what is the president immune to as far as prosecution and pursuit?
Well, I don't think the president is, there's a bar or a high bar to clear to prosecute the president while he's in office. But this president's not going to be in office at the latest in 13 days. And at that point, I think following prosecution makes a lot of sense for anything that he has done, which is illegal. And this incitement to violence is just one of many things that he's going to have to answer for. And there is no protection for former presidents from a prosecution on activity that is blatantly illegal.
Russell in Lake Jackson, Texas, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Yeah, appreciate your service and both of y'all's time this afternoon, sir. What I was asking the screener was that, a lot of us had suffered. We've suffered through watching the person who was supposed to be looking out for the welfare of this country with dictatorship, trying to hold super spreader rallies in a time when the science didn't tell us to do that. I mean, Congressman, why did it take this than what happened in the last 2 weeks while y'all were trying to make legislation? Because, after having Americans have basically 4 years of their lives stole from them, that didn't do it. It took something like this to see that we had somebody that had been basically rogue the whole time, and then we know what's went on with the virus. It started off with a person coming in being bullied to everybody, including all our allies, putting tariffs on everybody. I mean, the push comes to shove, you just can't do it that way. And it was one time when President Senior Bush told the two Bush boys over some chads, calm it down. And it took their mom to sort it out because they couldn't. And then we've had to live through this. This is just ridiculous to steal 4 years of people's life. Thank you.
So I agree with you. And it's amazing to me that it's the same Trump who basically came in campaign when he first announced, but it took really the graphic visuals of the storming of the Capitol. First time I saw Republicans turn on him. And I think people had a fear that he is basically stoking instability, and certainly conservative wealth, if anything, does not want instability and revolution in this country. And so there was something about seeing the Capitol building stormed that brought home the reality of how dangerous Trump is, something that Democrats have been saying since the day he got into office.
A last minute here, Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Quick one for Representative Khanna.
Representative Khanna, we need expanded Medicare for all. Those of us out here who live on restricted incomes, particularly minimum wage employees, can no longer afford the feed and care of rich CEOs for United Healthcare or Blue Cross or any other health insurance industry. They cannot pay thousands of dollars a month for health insurance when they don't even make thousands of dollars a month. There's no way that we're going to be able to continue with private health insurance. How soon do you think that you can get this through the House and get it through the Senate with Mitch McConnell's group of people who support these rich people? We can't afford it any longer. Yeah, I would like...
Oh, I'm sorry, Norma. I thought you were finished.
Well, Norma, thank you for speaking out. I mean, I think what we need to do is have people like you in Washington and have press conferences with you and put a face to what suffering there is. I mean, there are a lot of people like you, Norma, who are working hard, who basically can't afford the insurance premiums and can't afford the medical deductibles and are either going into bankruptcy or foregoing medical care. And that is why having the expansion of Medicare for everyone, health care as a human right, has to be a priority. It is a fight, though. I mean, you have a lot of interest against it, but we're going to make sure that we get a vote on it in the House.
Representative Khanna, thanks so much for dropping by. It's always great having you with us.
Thank you. It's always great being on.
Thank you. We'll be back with more of Anything Goes Friday right after this on the Thom Hartmann Program. We're coming up here on the top of the hour. Speaking the truth, the multinational corporations and the fascists would really rather you didn't know. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code TOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code TOM.
Book for the Thom Hartmann Book Club today is A Nation Forged by Crisis, A New American History by Jay Sexton. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 9. The quest for national security and global power, America's shifting position in the international economy, and fluctuations in immigration have made the United States the nation that it is today. Americans' foreign relations have been conditioned its history not only in their cumulative effects over the long haul, but also as a result of their volatility. In periods of crisis, America's position in the world has lurched in unexpected directions. For as inexorable as the rise of the United States appears in retrospect, there have been contingent moments in which the very existence of our nation was up for grabs. This is the essence of crisis. The world turned upside down, the known replaced by the unknown, panic reigning as people struggle to maintain their balance and shifts in the very ground beneath their feet. It came with a speed and ferocity that left men dazed, New York Times correspondent Elliot Bell wrote of Wall Street's catastrophic collapse in October of 1929. Quote, the market seemed like an insensate thing that was wreaking a wild and pitiless revenge upon those who thought to master it, end quote. Crises are contagious, spreading like viruses from one realm to another. It's not without reason that the word crisis was associated with medical conditions and health scares in the 19th century. Each of the periods under consideration in this book were less a singular crisis than a set of interlinked crises. A political crisis could trigger an economic panic, which in turn could intensify social conflict, and so on. As these pandemics spread through the body politic, crisis itself was normalized, becoming an almost accepted characteristic of an age. Just as foreign crises have spread to the United States, domestic ones have spilled across its borders, unsettling foreign countries and peoples, as well as reconfiguring America's connections to the world. Consider the fateful winter of secession that followed the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln. The crisis over slavery that divided the Union into warring sections that led to a series of sharp reversals in America's position in the global system. The foreign capital that had rushed into the roaring American economy in the preceding decades suddenly began to flee. Indeed, more capital left the United States in 1860 to 1862 than came into it. Also a once-in-a-century occurrence. One of the world's most valuable commodities and America's largest exports, Southern cotton, was confined to the ports of the Confederacy as a result of Richmond's ill-fated diplomatic strategy, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the British textile town of Lancashire. The most unexpected reversal was how the national security that the United States had attained after the war against Mexico in the 1840s was suddenly imperiled, with European powers encroaching once again upon the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, the Confederate emissaries across the Atlantic were in search of alliance with Britain. Our country, Secretary of State William Seward lamented in early 1861, after having expelled all European powers from the continent, now threatened to relapse into an aggravated form of its colonial experience, and like India, Turkey, China, and Italy, become the theater of transatlantic intervention and rapacity. A wider view of American history that looks beyond the nation's borders brings into focus not only the migration patterns, economic flows, and international rivalries that have connected the United States to the world, but also those rare moments in which the very existence of the nation was in question. Perhaps none was more pregnant with implications than the autumn of 1877, when the fate of the Patriots' bid for independence hung in the balance. Having proclaimed their independence to the world the previous 4th of July, their cause had stalled on the battlefield and in the diplomatic courts of the old world. I think the game is pretty near up, Washington privately confessed at year's end. To accomplish their independence is not quite so easy as to declare it, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham haughtily remarked. But then a series of events forever changed the course of modern history. The stunning Patriot victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October, the drafting of the Articles of Confederation in November that, for all its limitations, further demonstrated the political resolve of the Americans. And most of all, the alliance signed with France in February 1778, which provided the Patriots with the resources, military assistance, and naval power that ultimately tipped the scales in their favor. There are comparable Saratoga moments in other crises in U.S. history, as we shall see. These contingent moments played out in their own distinctive ways, but are joined by a common denominator that has been curiously forgotten in our age of U.S. global power. Foreign states and people have played decisive roles in the critical moments of American history. As we make our way through our own era of global instability, in an unprecedentedly interconnected world, there's perhaps no more important lesson from the past to keep in mind. Crisis may beget crisis, Franklin Roosevelt said, as his administration transitioned from battling the Great Depression to entering the Second World War. But the progress underneath does not wholly halt. It does go forward, end quote. Like so many of Roosevelt's public statements, this one reveals a truth even as it conceals others. The United States came out on the other side of its greatest crises as a stronger and more efficiently organized nation, as Roosevelt suggested. The process of mobilizing resources to counter threats catalyzed innovations in political economy, such as the creation of a national financial system during the Civil War, and the economic reforms of the New Deal. The book is A Nation Forged by Crisis by Jay Sexton. Hours of her missions, months hunting for remaining extracts of these strange disappeared papers, years digging out forgotten documents and memoirs. The book A Woman of No Importance by Sonia Purnell.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So you ever heard of the Republican Attorneys General Association? These are attorneys general in Republican states, about half the states. They have an association. That association has basically a political action arm, a lobbying arm. It's called the Rule of Law Defense Fund. And on Wednesday, the Republican Attorney Generals Association apparently paid somebody to produce the following robocall. We're still trying to figure out who all it went to, but I believe that you can hear this. I'm going to pull my microphone and play this for you. Check this out.
At 1 o'clock p.m., we will march to the Capitol building and call on Congress to stop this deal. We are hoping patriots like you will join us to continue the fight to protect the integrity of our election. For more information, visit marchtosaveamerica.com. This call is paid for and authorized by the Rule of Law Defense Fund, 202-796-5838.
There you go. So that was the robocall that went out. I can't say yet or exactly to whom it went. There's the headline over on Raw Story: Republican attorneys general spent money organizing turnout for Trump's insurrection at the Capitol. And this was published in the Atlanta Constitution Journal, by the way, reporting on the call. The Republican Attorneys General Association has now responded, saying, and I quote, this is from their executive director, Adam Piper. He says, the Republican Attorneys General Association and Rule of Law Defense Fund had no involvement in the planning, sponsoring, or organization of Wednesday's event. Notice he hasn't said we did not encourage people to go. No Republican AG authorized the staff's decision to amplify a colleague speaking at the event. In other words, somebody from the Republican Attorneys General Association actually spoke at this event, this traitorous, treasonous event that led to the death of 6 people. And anyhow, back to his statement. Organizationally and individually, we strongly condemn and disavow the events which occurred. Yeah, right. There's a lawyer who has been outed. He lost his job as a lawyer. There's a guy who's a senior executive in a fairly large company. He has lost his job. It's amazing that a lot of the people who have been identified so far are not, backwoods yahoos, which is how, people running around with Confederate flags are typically characterized in the media. But literally lawyers and executives and politicians, a newly elected politician from West Virginia, from the West Virginia legislature, showed up to trash. I'm talking about the people who went inside and trashed the Capitol building, who committed multiple felonies. And by the way, one of the most interesting parts of all this is that after the rioting, if you want to call it that, let's just go back to the very beginning with after George Floyd died in Minneapolis or in Minnesota. Remember Umbrella Man? The white guy who, for a while there, they thought he was a St. Paul police officer. I'm not sure that he's still been identified, but this guy came out with, he was wearing an umbrella so he couldn't be surveilled. He couldn't, they couldn't get his face from above, and wearing masks and all this kind of stuff. And he started smashing windows. That was the first breaking of windows. I mentioned in the first hour of the program kind of that hyena herd mentality among humans, the predator mentality. Oh, that deer is down, there's blood, boom, everybody goes. Well, that's what happened. That led to then looting and that sort of thing. So after that happened, Donald Trump signed an executive order because in his mind, it's all looting is, looting equals black people, right? Signed an executive order that anybody prosecuted for looting would have to serve the full 10-year sentence under the federal anti-looting statutes. Well, now we've got pictures of these guys carrying stuff, looting the Capitol building, carrying out podiums, carrying out Speaker Pelosi's the sign from outside her door, documents from inside their buildings. One of my senators had a laptop stolen out of his office. I mean, this is looting. So we have now had 6 deaths and looting. Now that's way more than happened in Minneapolis when Donald Trump said, throw the book at him. I'm not hearing any throw the book at him out of Donald Trump or his administration. In fact, actually, there's a very bizarre report over on Raw Story about how Trump was back at the White House watching the Capitol being seized, and he thought this was the coolest thing ever, and he couldn't figure out why the people around him thought it was not a good thing. This is a man obviously completely ignorant of American history. Never had to pay attention in class, always had somebody he could hire to take his exams for him and everything else. But anyway, it's Anything Goes Friday. Let's pick up your phone calls here. Nancy in Woodland, California. Hey, Nancy, what's on your mind today?
Hi. In addition to impeaching or prosecuting Trump for sedition, and also in addition to arresting the people who carried out the attack on the Capitol, the Republicans in Congress, for instance, Cruz and Hawley and the rest of those, need to be expelled right now and prosecuted for sedition. And I'm just wondering, what is your feeling from talking to various, for instance, Ro Khanna or any of the other politicians? Are they interested in doing this? I mean, it should be happening now. I
agree. I don't recall that question was asked of Representative Khanna, and I'm very reluctant to put words in people's mouths, particularly elected officials. So I don't know. I can tell you that, just from my own personal experience interacting broadly with members of Congress for several decades, that comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, brotherhood, fellowship, is a big deal. And they don't go after each other except in really extreme circumstances. And the hope, springs eternal that we can bring people back to rationality and all this. But I'm with you. I think this has gone way beyond rationality. This has gone way beyond anything that is legal. And this is, Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, at the very least, should be expelled from the Senate. And if not expelled, at the very least should be censured. And, time will tell. There's going to be there is a new Congress right now. There's going to be soon a new majority leader in the United States Senate, which will be Chuck Schumer. And we'll see where this goes. But Nancy, I absolutely share your outrage. Thank you for the call. Tom in Urbana, Illinois. Hey, Tom, we just have a minute to the break. What's up?
I just wanted to ask, how deep does this rot go? What's the root cause? I mean, granted, the internet is terrible, and what your last caller just said, all that she said is absolutely correct. But we've got to get down to the root of it. Hedges.
I'll give you the root of it, Tom.
American fascism.
Forgive my jumping in here, but we just have 30 seconds. The root of it is that the Republican Party is all about money and big billionaires and big corporations. That's not enough people to get them elected. So they brought in the racists in 1968 with Nixon's Southern strategy. Then they brought in the gun nuts. Then they brought in the anti-abortion and misogynistic zealots. Then they brought in the anti-gay people. They are running out of people that they can bring in, basically suckers that they can get to vote for Republicans. And so now they've had to embrace the conspiracy theory nuts. Now they've brought the conspiracy theory crazies into their party, and those people have largely taken over their party. And it may well be that the Republican Party, Tom, thank you for the call, that the Republican Party is now in the same position as the dog who's always chasing cars and finally caught one. And what do I do now? Right? I realize it's kind of a funny little metaphor, and this is deadly serious stuff, but that's what's going on. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
When a political party starts pandering to fascists, racists, conspiracy theorists, its days are numbered. And welcome back. Jeff in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Thanks for taking my call and best wishes in the new year. I don't think anybody brought it up with Ro Khanna, but I know getting $2,000 checks out to people is a priority of his. And, just like the New Deal helped quell the America First fascist movement in the 30s, a strong progressive agenda should do the same, much of the same now. But in terms of electoral reform, Tom, what would you prioritize? I think it's important to point out that this attempted coup was against a president-elect who's a 75-year-old white guy. Imagine how emboldened these same treasonous elites and their foot soldiers are going to feel if Kamala Harris is our next president-elect. And Tom, what do you think about moving up the inauguration a month to December 20th?
That would require an amendment to the Constitution. I think it's pretty unlikely, but I would not be opposed to it. But in terms of electoral reform, I think job one has to be getting money out of politics, reversing the Supreme Court decisions in 76 and 78, Buckley and Bellotti, and in 2010, Citizens United. Those decisions have to be reversed, and we need to put back into place the Tillman Act, which from 1907 made it a federal felony for any corporation to give money to any federal politician, for office, campaign for office, and which was overturned by the Bellotti decision in 78, and bring back the good government reforms that followed during the Jerry Ford presidency, that followed the Nixon bribery scandals, that limited the amount of money that individuals could give to political campaigns. And I think that there are several different ways that can be done, getting around those Supreme Court decisions. My preference would be just a steamroller approach, simply striking down the Supreme Court decisions and exercising Article 3, Section 2 and saying, the Supreme Court, you may not rule on this. But I know that Congress is not going to do that. My voice is, my perspective on that is only shared by a few people. But I think that there are ways that they could get around it, Jeff, and that is absolutely where I would begin. Thanks a lot for the call. Susie in Vaughan, Washington. Hey, Susie, what's up?
Oh, thank you. So my question is there anywhere in the Constitution, because I don't know it very well, honestly, sadly, but that specifically says that we as a people are protected not only from foreigners, but from our own governing office should they go, crazy or whatever? Is there anything that protects us as a people? And if there is, can we use that to get this guy gone in the next ASAP?
Well, that's what the Bill of Rights is, and this was the big debate. After the Constitution was written, Jefferson wrote a letter back to Madison in December of 1787 and said, I like this, I like the three parts of government, I like Congress being split in half, I like all those things, but what I don't like is that there's not an explicit Bill of Rights that essentially protects the individuals, the citizens of the United States, from the behavior of their government. And he got it passed. And that's why when Barack Obama was running for president in 2008, he made it in the course of a conversation with somebody. He said the Constitution is a negative statement of rights. What he was speaking of is that it limits the power of government. And of course, Republicans went nuts and went after him for saying that, but that's actually what it is. So, yeah, we're protected by the Bill of Rights, Susie. The Supreme Court has not done a good job of defending that, particularly, but that and elections. I mean, the other answer to your question, the eternal answer to your question, is we have term limits. They're called elections, and that's what we need to be focusing on. We'll be right back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, we just put a new video up for supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com, and it's about what would have happened if back in 1941, when we were attacked by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor, what would have happened if Franklin Roosevelt had said, well, Hawaii didn't vote for me, and it's only 2,404 dead people. I mean, that's not so many, right? What's the big deal? Or what would have happened if my dad, who, joined the Army to go fight in World War II, if my dad had said, well, it's only 2,400 people, and I live in Michigan, and they're way over in Hawaii. They're never going to get to Michigan. That's the poison that is spreading in America right now, that we really need to take on. And so anyhow, that's the essence of this, the new video that we just put up. You can find it over at ThomHartmann.com, and I think you'll find it fascinating. Thank you for your support. Welcome back to Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program, and Doris in DeKalb, Georgia. Chris in DeKalb, Georgia. Hey, Chris, what's up?
Hi. Trump won't go to the inauguration, not because of some weird principle he thinks he has, but because the violence he incited, he knows is going to occur on the 20th. He refuses to take part in the violence he created and doesn't want to be in the line of fire, just like when he dodged the draft.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And what I'm seeing on the right-wing side of social media is a widespread belief among many of these folks that what happened on January 6th was the dress rehearsal for January 20th. And that alarms me tremendously. And my guess is that the media is not talking about these messages that anybody can see. If you just, you go onto Parler, you go onto Twitter, use it, create another account, and just follow right-wingers, and pretty soon they'll just start feeding, and the same with Facebook, they'll start feeding them to you. It's all there, you can see it, but it's not being reported on, and I think it's because people are very, very concerned. And I think that Trump isn't going to show up. I don't think it's because he expects that there's going to be some sort of massive attack or something, but it'll just look bad if his people show up and he's there. And plus, he's so afraid of being called a loser. His father really burned that into him, and there's that too. But Chris, I think you're onto something. Thank you for the call, Mark in Sauk City, Wisconsin. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, Tom, and thinking of the pardoning power that President Trump has been so willing to exercise, I think that perhaps when the new Congress comes into place with the new administration, that they need to call everybody that Trump has pardoned in and ask them specifically, what crimes are you pardoned for? And because then they'll no longer be protected by the Fifth Amendment. They'll have to answer the question under contempt grounds. And then we'll lay bare all the crimes that they have committed, and hopefully that will make them, basically untouchable as far as polite society, to use an old term. That Trump is going to be giving these things out now.
I think that's already happened.
As dispensers.
There was an interesting piece in the Daily Beast last night about how Jared and Ivanka's friends have completely deserted them. They are completely radioactive now. Surprise, surprise. But his pardon powers. This needs to be clarified. When the framers were discussing what happens if a president tries to pardon somebody who engaged in a criminal conspiracy with him, one of the members, and I'm sorry I don't remember who it was, but one of the members piped up and said, should that be the case, he would have been impeached. So this is an irrelevant discussion. Well, it turns out here, 240 years later, that it's not an irrelevant discussion, and a lot of this stuff needs to be, clarified and laid out. Spot on. Thanks a lot, Mark. Blaine in Thousand Oaks, California. Hey, Blaine, what's up?
Tom, you're my hero. This was an organized and orchestrated event. Obviously, I went on TV, and I must have been an investigator in an earlier life maybe, but I videotaped certain images, and three stood out. One where the line of police opened the barricades and walked back, leading the demonstrators. Two, at the steps now, all the demonstrators are sitting there, but the line of police is still holding them off. The line of police turned and just all at once led the demonstrators in. The third image I saw was taken, it looked like, now this is in the house. Somebody was up in the balcony taking a video onto the floor where a dozen of these rioters were, just milling around. But one guy, if you notice, he was by the desk. He was kneeling, and he was going through these papers. He had a backpack, he had a stack of papers, and he's very focused. He's kneeling down on the floor. He had a black hoodie on, and he's definitely has a mission. And I think under the cover of all these, insurgents, there were certain individuals that had missions to do whatever. This whole thing was a planned thing. And while it was happening, I was texting people saying, oh, well, they were told to stand down. I mean, it was obvious to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
one of the people arrested needed a Russian interpreter, by the way. I mean, it's like, whoa, what's going on here? I'm very concerned that somebody might have been walking around with a thumb drive, popping keylogger or other viral stuff into computers in the Capitol building.
Yeah,
I mean, it would have been
well,
a
they're in
simple
their
thing to do.
offices. I mean, yeah, was the guy doing a Nancy? And one guy, you saw him. There was one guy at a desk looking down, and the light was kind of green light on his face, and he was doing something very, he was focused on doing something in an office. So this is your typical rioter.
And Steve Schmidt is all over that video of the police, opening the barricades and welcoming the rioters into the Capitol building. And he's been conspicuously absent from MSNBC for the last 2 days since he started tweeting about that. And I wonder if there's a correlation between those two things, which concerns me. Blaine, thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday right after this break. Our book for the Thom Hartmann Book Club today is A Nation Forged by Crisis, A New American History by Jay Sexton. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 9. The quest for national security and global power, America's shifting position in the international economy, and fluctuations in immigration have made the United States the nation that it is today. Americans' foreign relations have been conditioned its history not only in their cumulative effects over the long haul, but also as a result of their volatility. In periods of crisis, America's position in the world has lurched in unexpected directions. For as inexorable as the rise of the United States appears in retrospect, there have been contingent moments in which the very existence of our nation was up for grabs. This is the essence of crisis. The world turned upside down, the known replaced by the unknown, panic reigning as people struggle to maintain their balance and shifts in the very ground beneath their feet. It came with a speed and ferocity that left men dazed, New York Times correspondent Elliot Bell wrote of Wall Street's catastrophic collapse in October of 1929. Quote, the market seemed like an insensate thing that was wreaking a wild and pitiless revenge upon those who thought to master it, end quote. Crises are contagious, spreading like viruses from one realm to another. It's not without reason that the word crisis was associated with medical conditions and health scares in the 19th century. Each of the periods under consideration in this book were less a singular crisis than a set of interlinked crises. A political crisis could trigger an economic panic, which in turn could intensify social conflict, and so on. As these pandemics spread through the body politic, crisis itself was normalized, becoming an almost accepted characteristic of an age. Just as foreign crises have spread to the United States, domestic ones have spilled across its borders, unsettling foreign countries and peoples, as well as reconfiguring America's connections to the world. Consider the fateful winter of secession that followed the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln. The crisis over slavery that divided the Union into warring sections that led to a series of sharp reversals in America's position in the global system. The foreign capital that had rushed into the roaring American economy in the preceding decades suddenly began to flee. Indeed, more capital left the United States in 1860 to 1862 than came into it. Also a once-in-a-century occurrence. One of the world's most valuable commodities and America's largest exports, Southern cotton, was confined to the ports of the Confederacy as a result of Richmond's ill-fated diplomatic strategy, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the British textile town of Lancashire. The most unexpected reversal was how the national security that the United States had attained after the war against Mexico in the 1840s was suddenly imperiled, with European powers encroaching once again upon the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, the Confederate emissaries across the Atlantic were in search of alliance with Britain. Our country, Secretary of State William Seward lamented in early 1861, after having expelled all European powers from the continent, now threatened to relapse into an aggravated form of its colonial experience, and like India, Turkey, China, and Italy, become the theater of transatlantic intervention and rapacity. A wider view of American history that looks beyond the nation's borders
brings into focus not only the migration patterns, economic flows, and international rivalries that have connected the United States to the world, but also those rare moments in which the very existence of the nation was in question. Perhaps none was more pregnant with implications than the autumn of 1877, when the fate of the Patriots' bid for independence hung in the balance. Having proclaimed their independence to the world the previous 4th of July, their cause had stalled on the battlefield and in the diplomatic courts of the old world. I think the game is pretty near up, Washington privately confessed at year's end. To accomplish their independence is not quite so easy as to declare it, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham haughtily remarked. But then a series of events forever changed the course of modern history. The stunning Patriot victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October, the drafting of the Articles of Confederation in November that, for all its limitations, further demonstrated the political resolve of the Americans. And most of all, the alliance signed with France in February 1778, which provided the Patriots with the resources, military assistance, and naval power that ultimately tipped the scales in their favor. There are comparable Saratoga moments in other crises in U.S. history, as we shall see. These contingent moments played out in their own distinctive ways, but are joined by a common denominator that has been curiously forgotten in our age of U.S. global power. Foreign states and people have played decisive roles in the critical moments of American history. As we make our way through our own era of global instability, in an unprecedentedly interconnected world, there's perhaps no more important lesson from the past to keep in mind. Crisis may beget crisis, Franklin Roosevelt said, as his administration transitioned from battling the Great Depression to entering the Second World War. But the progress underneath does not wholly halt. It does go forward, end quote. Like so many of Roosevelt's public statements, this one reveals a truth even as it conceals others. The United States came out on the other side of its greatest crises as a stronger and more efficiently organized nation, as Roosevelt suggested. The process of mobilizing resources to counter threats catalyzed innovations in political economy, such as the creation of a national financial system during the Civil War, and the economic reforms of the New Deal. The book is A Nation Forged by Crisis by Jay Sexton.
The hidden history of the war on voting tells how the GOP has been stealing elections for decades and will again this year unless we stop them. You know, back in the 1950s, or maybe it was the early 60s, I'm pretty sure it was the late 50s, Congress passed a law saying that if churches want to maintain their nonprofit status, if they don't want to have to pay taxes on the millions and billions that they're raking in, I mean, Pat Robertson is now a billionaire from donations and things, from, you know, tax-exempt contributions. Right? If you want to keep that money tax-free, if you don't want to have to pay taxes on it, if you don't want to have to pay local taxes, you don't want to have to pay sales taxes, you don't want to have to pay property taxes, if you want to be tax-free, there's only one thing you have to do, churches, and that is don't engage yourself in politics. Because politics is how tax policy is made, and it's just not right. If we're going to subsidize you, all of us taxpayers, you don't engage yourself in politics. Well, in 2017, Trump issued an executive order basically telling the IRS, don't enforce this rule. We've got a whole rant about it up at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. Check it out. Well, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, what's up?
Hi. The jobs report came out today, and for Donald Trump's 4 years in the White House, he has now lost 3 million jobs. And I need to point out that in the last 32 years, the Republicans had the White House 16 of those years, and the Democratic members had it for 16 of those years. And the Democratic members, which was Obama and Bill Clinton, they saw 35 million jobs created in their 16 years. The Republicans saw zero, and I need to be very clear with this. They saw zero jobs created in their 16 years now that Trump has lost 3 million jobs. The Republicans get us all excited about meaningless stuff like Hillary Clinton's emails, and then they get elected into the White House, and then the real carnage starts. Now we have, in the last 3 days, we've seen 4,000 Americans die per day. And Newsmax is sitting up there implying that what those Republicans did when they stormed the Capitol, that wasn't as bad as 9/11. 4,000 Americans did not die on 9/11.
Yeah.
But that's what happened when they stormed.
Yeah, these Republicans have presided over a series of disasters. The economic disaster is one that never gets enough ink, enough coverage. And Larry, I am totally with you and spot on. Very well said. Thank you. Dan in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Dan, what's up? Dan? I'm not hearing Dan. Dan's on line 6, Joyce. David in Torrance, California. Hey, David, what's up?
Happy New Year, Tom. My question is, in the past few decades, every Democratic president have lost seat in midterms. My question is, why can't Biden go to the people and basically tell them that I want you to help me to help you? And within that, the strategy would helping gain seats instead of losing?
I agree with you, David. I think the biggest challenge that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, President Biden, Vice President Harris, are facing right now, and more importantly, will face following January 20th, is communication. And they've got to get their communication. Barack Obama was great at giving speeches, but on a day-to-day basis in the White House, Donald Trump just has steamrolled now I don't want somebody tweeting 30 times a day, rage tweeting and all that kind of bizarre stuff. But we have not had a president, a Democratic president, who did that kind of really good job communicating with the people since the first couple of years of Lyndon Johnson's presidency, or probably more importantly, Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats. And I am very hopeful that Joe Biden will bring back some version of those fireside chats, at least a weekly meeting with the American people every single week, and regular briefings from the White House talking about what's actually going on. This is absolutely necessary in order to preserve our republic. David, thank you. Richard in Atlanta. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Hey, Tom, if you haven't had a chance yet, you need to read the complaint filed by Dominion Voting Systems against Sidney Powell. It shows
the $1.2 billion lawsuit.
Yeah, it shows exactly how baseless this whole scam was. It was a scam. It looked to me like it was a money-raising scam. They kept perpetuating this to raise money on.
Yep. And, well, not just that. It's a twofer, Richard. Number one, they get to, convey outraged lies to their followers, and their followers send them $100 checks in exchange for that. But number two, then they get to go back to the voters and say, look at this. We've got all this proof of voter fraud. We need to make it harder and harder and harder for people to vote. Pretty soon you're going to have an iris scan, or put in your fingerprint, or not just bring your driver's license, but also bring your passport. I don't know what the next one is going to be. I know down in Georgia, the Georgia legislature actually flirted with proposed legislation. It never got to a vote in the Georgia legislature, but Republicans proposed legislation saying that you could not vote absentee ballot unless you had a car registered in Georgia. They are going to be looking for ways to make it harder and harder for poor people, old people, black people, brown people, and young people, students, to vote. And you can count on that just like you can count on the sun going up tomorrow morning. And that's the main reason why these fools like Hawley and Cruz, in addition to their love of fascism and their hatred of American republicanism, American democracy, that's one of the main reasons why they continued to get the phrase voter fraud and voter irregularities and election irregularities into virtually every sentence. There was no voter fraud in this election. There was plenty of election fraud, where in mostly black neighborhoods, but also in Native American communities and Hispanic communities, in college towns and whatnot, where the Republican election officials would make it very difficult to vote by having fewer machines that are broken down, machines that don't work. So people would have to stand in line for 6, 8, 10 hours during a friggin' pandemic. they're gonna come up with a whole brand new set of strategies, Richard. And I just got an email about 30 minutes ago. I read it during the break from FreedomWorks, the organization that the Koch brothers founded back in the day to promote the Tea Party, and from the president of FreedomWorks, saying that H.R. 1, which we know is going to be the first piece of legislation Nancy Pelosi drops, which takes money out of politics and gives money to the states to secure elections, saying that this was an attempt to turn our elections over to Democratic lawyers. And I mean, they have already begun screaming and squealing about any kind of reforms that might make it easy for Americans to vote. Because when Americans can easily vote, Republicans lose elections. As Donald Trump said, he said, hey, if these Democrats keep voting in these kind of numbers, you'll never see another Republican president. Let's hope. Richard, thank you for the call. Melissa in Minneapolis. Hey, Melissa, thanks for listening to AM 950. What's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what you said earlier about the umbrella guy in Minneapolis smashing windows at the Black Lives Matters protests. They did, in fact, identify him. I can't recall his name, but he was involved with a white supremacist biker group, and he was also involved in an incident over in Stillwater where he was following and harassing a Somali woman and her small child to the point where business owners had to come out and protect her and call for help. So they know who this guy is. Whether they've prosecuted him or not, I do not know. But
interesting. Thank you for that, Melissa. I recall something like that. It's not a local story for me, and there have been so many stories. There's so much water under the bridge since then. But if you learn anything, if you get any updates on what the status of this guy is and what's going on, he's not a lone figure. This agent provocateur thing it has a history that goes back to ancient Rome, and has been a big part of of Republican strategies. And now they're trying to, you've got right-wing media organizations right now, and Fox is doing this kind of in a soft way. Some of the other ones are doing it in a very hard way, suggesting that the people, the traitors who stormed the Capitol, literally pooped on the floors and spread feces on the wall in Chuck Schumer's office and other offices, killed 6 people, that these people were actually Antifa, right? Yeah, this is the new big lie, and big lies lead to terrible, terrible outcomes. Thank you for the call, Melissa. Nina in McAlpin, Florida. Hey, Nina, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. 3 quick things. One, thank you.
We have to do one, Nina. We just have a minute.
Washington Journal. Thank you for being on that. Secondly, I think that we need to eliminate these student loans for these kids that will always have bad credit. They'll never be able to get a job until we start reset on them. And thirdly, I would just like to say I emailed both of my Republican senators in Florida. Ha. Rubio never got back to me. Scott voted with McConnell. So I've faced reality that there is no getting around anything like that. But I appreciate your show, and thank you for listening to me. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nina. I think the bottom line of everything you just said is it's time to do everything we can to strengthen and be part of the Democratic Party and turn it into a progressive force to help save America from these fascists and neo-fascists and their billionaire backers. I don't know any other way to say it other than that. It's very straightforward stuff. We've got one party that wants America to be America, and you got another part that wants America to be something like Nazi Germany. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Nazi Germany might be a little over the top, but, an authoritarian pseudo-fascist or neo-fascist. And welcome back. Bobby in La Puente, California. Hey, Bobby, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
My pleasure. No, I just want to say how these looters, rioters, fascists, racists hurt me. Because like your father and my father fought against them in World War II. My dad was in Normandy, second wave, North Africa, along with his, the ones that died for what? For this coward? They follow this coward? 5 deferrals. I enlisted. I flunked twice. Not that I wanted to go, but it hurt me, because it brings up PTSD, because I grew up with those folks, the name calling, the insults. At one time, I hate to share this, I wanted to take the skin, the color of my skin off. That's how they got to me. But I'm grateful to the Creator that I accept myself. Honest, Tom. And, thank you for your selected classroom. You and your callers, it benefits me so much. Your wife, the people that work with you, so grateful to you, me and my wife. And thanks for, taking my call. I don't know how you feel about this. Like your dad fought my dad and being disrespected.
Yeah. I completely agree with you, Bobby, and you said it so very, very well. These Republicans are spitting on the graves of our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents who, at least those among us who fought for democracy in the United States. And they are, and they're essentially elevating the Confederate traitors, particularly showing up at the Capitol building with Confederate flags. It is beyond despicable. I lack words for how despicable it is. Bobby, thank you for the call. Thank you for your kind words. And my very, very best to you and your family. Thank you, Bobby. Thad in Littleton, Colorado. Hey, Thad, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for doing all that you do and teaching us so much. One thing I have to say is we need to radically look at the Secret Service and for the Trump crime family. We shouldn't be paying to fly them around and paying for all their Secret Service details. This man literally spent a year flying around on Air Force One on our dime. I think Air Force.
This is another reason to impeach him, Thad. If he gets impeached,
exactly.
Then after he leaves the White House, he will not have that Secret Service protection that we pay for.
So he will lose his pension as well.
He'll lose everything. It'll be as if he was never president.
I'm all for that. But moving forward, I don't think any of his any president's children, if they're over the age of 18, should get a Secret Service detail. And if
they went big game hunting in Mongolia with Don Jr. and Eric. I mean, to kill endangered species illegally, by the way, at the time.
I know it's ridiculous. We should not be paying for these people to do that. They should, and presidents should only get a 3 or a 4 week vacation. What do most Americans get a year? And he's literally taking 3 months a year.
Yeah. Well, he's taken, I think, either 3 out of every 4 days or 2 out of every 3 days that he's been in the White House.
Well, and then once you count his Nuremberg rallies,
Yeah, there you go. I'm completely with you, Andy. It's Thad. And it's another good reason why he needs to be impeached and removed from office. Let's hope. Coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. You can help America return to democracy by telling friends and family how to listen to this and other great progressive programs. Tag You're It. Hey, we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program that talks about the list of things that if Democrats did them, they would never lose another election. And I mean that quite sincerely and quite seriously. And part of the proof of it is that Donald Trump campaigned on a number of these things, and millions of Republicans voted for him because of them. A couple of them, for example, Donald Trump promised he was going to stop crazy trade deals and stop companies from exporting jobs. He was going to force Apple to bring their factories back to America. Well, Democrats need to be talking about this, and they have been forever. I mean, this is Bernie and Sherrod Brown and these guys all with these things. Donald Trump said he was going to give everybody in America health care. He said we were going to get debt-free college. There's a whole bunch of stuff. You can check it all out. It's the new video. It's over at thomhartmann.com. Thanks for your support. Tag You're It. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Jack in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jack, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for everything you do. You can imagine my horror when I'm watching on Wednesday and I see my former congressman in his Trump hat on the steps of the Capitol screaming for the end of democracy.
Who is this?
Rick Sircone. He's the former congressman. Lamb now. Connor Lamb holds that seat now. Mm-hmm. But his predecessor, Rick Sircone. Now, I was happy to see the next day he tried to walk back his stance, saying he was taken out of context. But he was fired. He was fired from his professorship at St. Vincent's College yesterday. So good. That was good. But to see, maybe that's how they knew their way around the Capitol building, because they had ex-congressmen in the crowd giving them the directions.
Amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
So,
Jack, we need, I sure hope that the FBI is all over this, and I realize they may not be right now, but another 13, 14 days down the road, I think it's going to be happening. Jack, thank you for the call, and thanks for the heads up on that. George in Valparaiso, Indiana. Hey, George, what's up?
Yes, Tom, every day seems like a week, so I don't know if this happened Wednesday, but I watch all news programs. I don't like Fox News, but I watch them to see what the enemy's talking about. And there was The Five, that big show run by Greg Gutfeld. And look on Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday, Greg Gutfeld looked at the camera and said, when Biden comes into office, he's coming after you. He hates you. And he looked at the camera and said, he hates you. And to me, I don't understand how you can, it seems like very instigating violence. I don't understand how you can do that.
I believe that's like yelling fire at a crowded theater.
Right. I mean, so I want you to look it up, because it really scared me.
I believe you, George. I mean, that's mild compared to some of the stuff that I've seen Tucker Carlson say and Sean Hannity say. These guys are so over the top, and what we're seeing right now is the fruit of it. I mean, this is the predictable fruit of what they've been doing. George, thank you for the call. Dan in Denver. Hey, Dan, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Don. Hi, Tom. I hope you can hear me this time. Hello, Tom. I'm talking about the impeachment, and here's a plan for the Democrats. They need to immediately file articles of impeachment, and then they need to go to the friendliest court they can find and file for a temporary restraining order against Trump for any pardons. And
if they want to do something like that, it would have to be done at the Supreme Court. That's the only venue where that has jurisdiction and where they would have standing in a dispute between the branches, which is essentially what you're describing, Dan.
Right. Well, they should go ahead and do it anyway. I mean, what's the worst case scenario?
Yeah.
They are where they are now.
Yeah.
And basically, and if the Supreme Court
take away the nuclear codes.
Yeah, and then they could have. Then you get every individual organization that is possibly has an interest, and you file hundreds of friends of the court briefs, and it would take them the 12 days left just to get through it in a reasonable way.
Yeah. No, I think it could be done much more quickly, but I think your suggestion is an excellent one, Dan, and I hope some Democrats are listening, elected members. Thank you. Kim in Sarasota, Florida. Hey, Kim, what's up?
Hey, last night on our local news, a 36-year-old dude, father of five, wife is a doctor, lives in Parrish, Florida, which is in Sarasota County, is the dude that was carrying Nancy Pelosi's podium around. He has not been arrested. He has not been arrested. The news went to his house. Of course, he didn't answer his door. His neighbors knocked on the door. He didn't answer the door. But anyway, it's just an interesting factoid. He hasn't been arrested.
Incredible.
So
keep us up to date on
all
that,
over.
Yeah. Keep us up to date on it, Kim. Thank you. Corinne in Minneapolis, listening to AM 950. Hey, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I am very concerned that Trump needs to be removed immediately. And I'm very concerned that impeachment is going to take too long. So a couple of days ago, I put out all of the cabinet members' phone numbers to my Indivisible group. and said, call them and ask them to get with Pence on the 25th Amendment. Well, now we know that Pence is probably not going to cooperate with that.
Definitely not going to. And two of the cabinet members have resigned now.
Yes, right. Probably to avoid this sort of thing. But this morning I put out another notice.
Corinne, I'm very sorry. I got to stop it there because it's literally the end of the show and the end of the week. Special thanks to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Joyce the Hammer, Nance, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethergett, Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jabbermocky, and Jay LeBlanc. For all the work that you all do on helping get this program going and staying on the air, in addition to special thanks to all of our affiliates who are carrying this program. Thank you. And thank you for listening and participating. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code TOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code TOM.